Hello and welcome to the show. I am Bret and I'm going to be your host today. This is my channel. If you haven't been here before, this is basically where we talk about Docker and DevOps and Kubernetes. And today on the show, I've got some special guests. But before we get to that, I want to just let you know about a couple of things. First, we're getting ready to make some big updates to the Docker Mastery course. In case you haven't seen my courses or know what those are about, you can now go to a single web page. I finally did the single web page thing where you can actually get them all from the same place, which you'd think I would have done that a long time ago. But on bretfisher.com/courses, you can see all three of my courses there with the best coupons to get those. And we're excited. We're putting out some updates here pretty soon. And then later this year, we're going to be releasing a full Kubernetes course. So you will hear more about that. And but today on the show, let me bring on, we've got today two great guys from the community of CI/CD, both working for the same company, CloudBees. You can see their titles down, their Twitter titles down there on the bottom there, their Twitter handles, sorry. Viktor Farcic from CloudBees. He's the principal software delivery strategist. There's only one of them, and he is it. I'm just kidding. And he's a developer advocate, so he's on the show today. Are you in Spain, in Barcelona? Is that? No,
Switzerland this week.
Switzerland.
In a hotel, yes.
And he's all over the place. In fact, the last time we saw each other was in Budapest. So that was random location on the planet. There for a fun time. So let me tell you a little bit about Viktor. He's been working with Docker a very long time, since the first beta release was made public. Since then, he's become a Docker Captain. That's where we got to know each other. And he's been advising big companies on how to improve their processes. Thanks for coming on the show, Viktor.
Thank you for having me.
And then there in the middle, squeezed in between us, is Oscar Medina. He's the developer advocate for Jenkins X, which will be the topic of our show today. So I'm excited to have him on the show, because who better to have on the show than someone who's working directly with Jenkins X every day. He is a senior architect and developer at CloudBees, and he started his Docker journey 4.5 years ago. That was still pretty early days of Docker. Since then, he's helped large companies move their monolithic apps to microservices and then orchestrate them on Kubernetes and AWS and Azure and Google Cloud, all the things, right? And he's an advocate for open source tools and frameworks. Thanks for being on the show, Oscar.
Thanks, Bret, for having me.
And all right, so this is sort of, we don't have this rehearsed, right? So that's what live on the internet means, is we didn't really rehearse. So we're going to be taking your questions. That's a key part of this show. That's why we do it live. So we're talking about, the focus is on Jenkins X today, but of course, these guys are from CloudBees. So they know Jenkins, they know the CloudBees product line. So if you have questions in general about CI, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, whatever term you want to use for all these different tools, that's why we're here talking today. And hopefully we'll have some good answers between the three of us for anything you throw at us. So, of course, this show is focused on containers. So a lot of what we do on the show is talk about how to solve traditional CI and CD problems and the workflows around that inside of containers. So, Viktor, maybe start us off with talking about, like, traditionally, where has Jenkins been fitting, and why did maybe Jenkins X need to be created? Like, where was the origin story of that?
So traditionally, not traditionally, currently and in the past and always, Jenkins is a very generic tool that allows you to do almost whatever you want, as long as it's related somehow with automation and orchestration of that automation, so on and so forth. So you want to run it on mainframe, you can run it on mainframe. You want a VM, you run it on VM. Well, basically, it fulfills almost every need, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's great. And then you might ask, why do we have Jenkins X? And the reason is because Jenkins X is really, really focused on a very relatively small segment of the industry, So Jenkins X assumes you're running Kubernetes. No questions asked about that. Your applications are cool and microservices, cloud native, all those things. And you accept an opinionated process, which sounds kind of like, oh yeah, why not? But actually most companies struggle with that because, you think you're cleverer than everybody else, and then you don't want any type of standard. you're going to spend 6 months trying to figure out how to do something. So Jenkins is unopinionated. This is opinionated. You need to accept the way how it works, the process, the flow, and everything.
So opinionated, that sometimes we think that that's a bad thing, but I feel like Docker itself is highly opinionated in terms of when you look at sort of other ways to run containers that we've had in the past. They were pretty generic, and it was hard for people to figure out what they were supposed to do with the tool once they learned the functionality. And I always felt like that was one of the secret sauces of Docker, was that it gave us, Docker Run does a lot of things, and that was an opinion of how you should download the image, and that the fact that there even was an image, that was an idea. And then, we're going to run it a certain way, we're going to have certain defaults, and we don't require you to run this really long command line. So is it fair to say like Jenkins is sort of a blank palette when you first created it? It's a general workflow automation tool, and then Jenkins X is sort of this focused on a unique workflow?
Yeah, so it's you can think of it as being more or less equivalent to Docker, just in a different segment of industry. This is how you do stuff. You can tweak it, you can change it more or less, but this is your continuous delivery pipeline in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And actually, the reason why I think that's important is that Kubernetes itself is as unopinionated as it can get. So how are you going to build your images? We don't know. It could be Docker, it could be Canico, it could be something else. How are you going to deploy your applications? Again, I don't know. It could be Knative, it could be deployments, it could be stateful set. And then it goes on and on and on and on. And after 3 years, you say, okay, now I think that I got it. And then you realize actually that you're again behind, because in those 3 years you're trying to figure it out. The things moved further away again, right?
Yeah.
Jenkins simplified. I mean, the goal is to put the best practices, kind of. This is how you build images. This is how you deploy stuff. This is how you run tests. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. I mean,
I like it.
I'm exaggerating. You can, of course, tweak things. You can modify it, but still, generally, you need to comply with the idea. Otherwise, it might not be the right tool for you.
So we have, Bret, to elaborate on that too, is that we give you the opinionated framework, if you would, GitOps and a few other things. It's up to you to tweak it, configure it, tweak the configuration to make it yours. So there's nothing holding you back to replacing, say, a registry, for example. You can use your own registry. We start off with a typical registry. That's just one example, but there are many other things, that you can plug and play, basically.
Right.
If I may just add, sorry, when you said tweak it, that's absolutely correct, but I beg you, people, don't. No, unless you really, really know what you're doing, because defaults make sense. Just like in Docker. In Docker, defaults make sense. You need to really know what you're doing to change them, not only because you think you're clever.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where that's why I tend to teach people Swarm before I teach them Kubernetes, because to teach Kubernetes, if you're just focused on the utility of it, the features of it, it doesn't really, like the first couple of days that you're training someone, they're not, if you're just teaching the documentation, they're not necessarily going to understand the ways they're supposed to use it for their situation. And so I tend to teach Swarm because, because it comes out of Docker by default, but it is an opinionated workflow that fits most people. It's like the 20% of the features that 80% of the people need, and then I teach Kubernetes on top of that. In fact, if everyone was on the show at the beginning, you saw a little green banner coming up, because in Berlin in a month I'm teaching something that I'm hoping will catch on a little bit, is Swarm and Kubernetes in one workshop, where we start with Swarm, we see how to deploy something really simple, and then we go to Kubernetes because it does things that Swarm doesn't do, right? When you need those edge cases and all that stuff. And because most people I think right now are like, I need to learn Kubernetes. That's their expectation. But they don't maybe realize that Kubernetes has, because it's unopinionated, it has so many ways to do things, and it has no opinion about CI/CD out of the box. There's no built-in mechanisms for that. It doesn't care which one you use. So I really like this idea of us giving tools to the finding a niche for that tool. And so, like, for example, a question we might get on this show is, does this work on Swarm? So I'm going to assume no. The scope of Jenkins X is not to also work on other orchestrators. It's just focused on one orchestrator, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's only Kubernetes, which is limiting, I understand. But on the other hand, if you focus on a tool, then you can probably make it better than if you focus on everything, and then
that's right.
Yeah, it's
mediocre in everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you already have a nice thing for you all is that you already have a tool for all those other things, right?
Exactly.
It's not like they have to leave; they just use a different tool. And so I at first when Jenkins X came out, like everyone else, I was thinking, well, is this running on top of Jenkins? Is this like a feature in Jenkins? What exactly is it? But it's a totally separate product, right? Like we're starting starting fresh.
Yeah, I think. One thing we're doing, Bret, is really preaching the fact that they're completely different products. Nothing, even the code base, they're not mixed at all. It's completely different, and it's open source. And in fact, in Lisbon coming up, we have a talk that we will focus strictly on introducing Jenkins X as what it is, a completely different product, but really go into what features and functionality it has so that people in the enterprise can understand, oh, yeah, it is not Jenkins. I think, Viktor and I had a couple of workshops in DevOps world, and the first thing Viktor said, I remember, was like, okay, whatever you know about Jenkins, forget it. Like, remove it from your head. This is like completely different product. And then he's like, what is Jenkins X? Just remove the word Jenkins out of it, and then you'll have what it is. So It was really shocking for people, but that's exactly what it is. It is not Jenkins. And so our job is to explain that thoroughly, and that's our goal anyway.
Yeah. So what's your elevator pitch there, Oscar? Like, you see someone in an elevator, and they're aware of CI/CD products, and they're a company that's planning on using Kubernetes, or they already have it, and they don't have What do you? Why switch to Jenkins X, or why even
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, Bret, is that who isn't on Kubernetes these days? And we position Jenkins X as being the Kubernetes native CI/CD. And that is at the sort of the key message for us. And you can see that on the homepage of the Jenkins X site, right? It's like, you want cloud native Kubernetes CI/CD, this is what you should be using.
Yeah.
So basically what happened with Jenkins and basically all other tools for CI/CD today, they work in Kubernetes, but they were never built from ground up to be for Kubernetes. Exactly. Which sounds maybe like not important difference, but actually it is. It's slightly different than when you design something specifically for something, right, than when it can run there simply just as like anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm assuming too that the setup. I mean, those of us that are familiar with Jenkins, we know that if you have a specific workflow in mind, like containers, and you're using Docker or Kubernetes. There's a process to Jenkins, because since Jenkins is unopinionated, you have to sort of add all the plugins that you need for that. And I'm assuming that Jenkins, I'm looking down at the bottom of the webpage, and it looks like a 2-line install. So
I
don't know how long that getting started video is, but I'm assuming it's not a 10-part course.
It definitely is. I think, thank you, Viktor. I think the only thing I'd say about that is that with one line, you can actually create a cluster in GKE and have yourself running in less than 5 minutes. But I'm going to tell you, just like Viktor said, when you start tweaking things, then you start wondering how to do certain things. You might break things. So we try to prevent you from doing that. But that's sort of inevitable, right? Inevitable. Everyone has a custom environment that need to tailor They already have maybe, some folks we've talked to have Terraform as a way to deploy clusters in the cloud. So what do? Well, we allow you to provision your Jenkins X Kubernetes cluster using infrastructure as code. Why not, right? So we are very aware of those things. And we're trying to every day adjust to that, right? Like make it better.
Yeah. What's that? So I call it the happy path, right? Like the ideal default deployment solution. Is it based on Git repos and the GitOps workflow? Is that the default out of the box kind of happy path thing, or
it's no, it's not the default. It's the only thing. So yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, if it's only one, then it is default as well. So.
Right.
It assumes that you're going to apply GitOps. There is so you heard before that some things can be tweaked. This is not negotiable. Your builds are triggered by you pushing something to Git.
Right.
That's the only way it can work.
Right. And honestly, for all of my students, I'm trying to guide them this way. For my clients, I'm trying to force them this way. That that Git becomes that central location. And I think a lot of us were probably doing GitOps before it was labeled by Weave Networks. I think they were the first ones to call it out as that term. But I think a lot of us were trying to figure out ways to use Git for that methodology because we were so used to using Git in development. And since the developers were now working closer with the operators, we were like, well, hey, look, we got this tool that it works so well in a team for us for managing change. It just happens to be for code. But could we figure out how to also use this for your operations stuff for server changes and deployment changes and stuff like that? And I think once GitHub and all the other tools out there got better and better at managing not just the difference in code, but also all the things around it, like PRs and comments and discussions, I think it was sort of it was an inevitability that we all are saying, okay, we're going to be putting all this stuff as much as we can, except for maybe secrets. But even then, now we got some plugins that you can actually do public secrets nowadays for Kubernetes, where we can put this stuff into a repo, and then that is our central source of truth. And we've talked about GitOps on the show before, but maybe one of you could sort of define GitOps for the audience, how you see it.
Simple. Nobody can access your cluster except Git. So if you want something to happen somewhere, if you want some change to be applied somewhere, you need to push a change to Git. Git will notify the cluster, and then something will happen. If you're unsure whether you're using GitOps or no, just remove all SSH access from all your servers. And if things stop working, then you're not doing it.
That's I like that. It's the absolute, which is I always talk about how everything's a journey. So like there's the first step in GitOps, which is like, okay, maybe we'll have deployments going automated. And then it's like now it's cluster changes. Now it's Terraform. Like, now it's whatever, CloudFormation. Like there's those different levels, but you're right. Like ultimately, if you have to SSH into something to make a change, then it's not GitOps.
The major difference is that, like, you mentioned Terraform, right? And many people are used to do something in Terraform and then they execute Terraform apply.
Right.
What I'm saying is that don't execute Terraform apply, push it to Git, and then you have a recording. You have a log of what you did. You know exactly what you have, right? And let the system take care of executing Terraform apply. You're too intelligent to execute the same command over and over again.
And normally in the past for us to do this, sorry, Oscar, but normally in the past for us to do this, like especially when clients come in, they're like, I want to automate this pipeline. It is a lot more work than what everybody initially thinks it's going to be, because tools don't have this mindset out of the box. They don't think, they're like, okay, well, I'll build your stuff based on Git, but I'm not going to do anything with it. And then you have to figure out, okay, now I'm writing a bunch of SSH scripts, SSH into servers, and then I have to type, and then it has to type the commands for me. And you end up going back to the sort of scripting hell of having all that stuff. So I'm assuming that Jenkins X prevents me from this a little bit.
Yeah. So I wanted to chime in a little bit about sort of what Viktor said too, because Yeah, Terraform, you don't need to be executing plan and apply. That should be automatic. And in fact, with the whole pull request on Git, right? That should already be happening, right? You do a pull request, the Terraform apply command happens, you see the results and whatnot. I mean, there are many tools like what is that? Atlantic, I think, is one of them. The Terraform Cloud allows you to do that stuff already too. And this is common now, so it's not anything new. You shouldn't be doing that manually, by the way. But
yeah.
We don't personally care how you do that part, right? That's not something we dictate anyway. So
yeah. All right, so I'm going to jump into questions real quick and see if we have anything in the chat. I see some questions that maybe we'll get to at the end of the show that aren't directly related to the conversation. I don't want to change the topic on us. One is what would be a good way to deploy Jenkins X atop AWS EKS? We are trying the rest of the question was we are depreciating old Jenkins on-prem servers to spin up executors as containers in Kubernetes.
So to deploy Jenkins X on EKS today, that's a single command JX install JX install. That will change very soon for EKS because we're switching from running a command to actually cloning a repository that has all the parameters, and then you change them. You change it to say I want EKS or something like that, and execute command. But ultimately, it's a single command, install few arguments depending on how much you want to tweak it, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a YAML-based configuration, basically, that, like Victor says, you track changes on Git, like your typical developer workflow, but you're actually changing your cluster infrastructure configuration by making those changes to the YAML, and doing pull requests and all that stuff.
Yeah.
If I may add something, there was a mention that question, transitioning their Jenkinses to cluster. I need to repeat it one more time. This is not Jenkins. If you install Jenkins X, your existing jobs will not automatically work there.
Right.
So you need to start over.
Yeah. There's no migration path either. I guess we should say that, right? There is no direct migration path. You have to redefine your pipelines in Jenkins X, basically.
Right. And I think that Crispy had a follow-on question that said, could you elaborate on how you would monitor Jenkins in K8s with Prometheus? I'm assuming since his original question was about Jenkins X, he's referring to Jenkins X, because we got to make sure that X is in there, or you're talking about a totally different thing. So how would you monitor Jenkins X with Prometheus?
So the key is what we said before.
Don't we
have me?
No. I'm just saying, don't we have an add-on on Jenkins X to do Prometheus monitoring?
Yeah. So we have we have an add-on that will install Prometheus. You might use it or no. What matters much more is that it is built to be Kubernetes native. That means that you monitor it in the same way how you monitor Kubernetes itself or anything else. If you have Prometheus running inside of your cluster, that Prometheus is already detecting things happening in your Kubernetes services and deployments and so on and so forth. So basically, if you have Prometheus, there's nothing for you to do. Metrics will just start pouring in.
All right. Next question. Can Jenkins X work with Kubernetes anywhere?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's running as a container inside of the cluster, right? Like it's running inside of Kubernetes.
Yeah. So if you have Kubernetes, you can run Jenkins X. Doesn't really matter which Kubernetes you have and where. Now, of course, there are always some slight differences between Kubernetes. You might have some weird combination that nobody ever tried before, but most likely, almost certainly, the answer is yes, whichever Kubernetes you have.
Yeah. Very cool. So Jenkins X not only deploys on Kubernetes, but it sounds like it will actually set up, or you have some automation that will set up Kubernetes clusters for you?
Yes. So you can basically say, I want to create a cluster with Jenkins X inside, or I want to install Jenkins X in an existing cluster. It's up to you to choose. Now, realistically, if you're talking about real production load, you're most likely going to set up Kubernetes yourself because you want to be in full control of that, and then you would install Jenkins X on top of it. Creating a cluster with Jenkins inside is, at least that's not official stand, but my personal preference, that's more like for demos and workshops, and you want to play around.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, then you create a cluster whichever way you would like to create and install Jenkins X inside.
Yeah, I think that was my guess, and I was waiting for you to talk about it because, we're all gonna, if you're the larger your enterprise, the harder it is for you to decide on which distribution of Kubernetes you're going to use, and you're probably not going to use a vanilla install from the upstream source. You're probably going to pick a distribution like OpenShift or Docker Enterprise or Rancher or one of the cloud vendors. There's only like 80 plus distribution options for Kubernetes. So you do one of those, and then, but yeah, having this option for us to set up and a quick little cluster and be able to just learn this. Now, another thing I think, I'm just going to say this, I assume that a company that has, like, if they have Kubernetes today, they already, if you're a business today, you already have a CI/CD workflow, or at least CI workflow in something. And I'm guessing that even if you have stuff from CI going into Kubernetes today, that you could run this in parallel and start migrating different workloads from your old solution to the Jenkins X solution. Is that a migration path in there?
Yeah, realistic. This is actually not even answer related directly to Jenkins X.
Yeah.
It's like you always have a migration depending on how big you are. You don't move everything to Kubernetes the first day. You don't Dockerize everything the first day.
Right.
There are always things running in parallel where you're trying to keep your lights on while you're introducing something cool and new and better and so on and so forth. And those lights might need to be kept on for next 50 years.
Right. You never know. You never know the end date of whatever you're putting into production.
Right.
Show me the end date of mainframes and COBOL in banks.
Right.
When you find out what's the end date, please let me know.
Yeah. All right. So this is some great questions. We've got some more questions showing up, so I'll let those queue. I see your questions there, Santiago. But I know that Oscar has prepared some stuff. He wants to do some show and tell. So take it away.
Well, okay. So I just checked my cluster, and I actually it would take us a little bit to walk users to create the cluster, but it's not in place. So I thought I had it in place. Maybe Viktor can actually do the actual demo. Unless people want, I could show you how to create the cluster with one command.
No. You're witnessing now the real life live. Yeah. Viktor, help me! I messed up again. That's our relationship. That's what's going on. Okay.
That's our workflow.
That's your workflow.
Yeah.
Viktor Ops.
Yeah, the Viktor Ops.
Let me see whether I have a cluster. Give me a second.
It's actually a company, Viktor Ops.
Yeah,
they stole your idea.
Yeah. He can't trademark that, unfortunately, right? Even the site, I think, is taken now, Viktor. So too bad for you.
Okay, so I have a cluster. Let's share the screen.
Yeah.
Now this is gonna be tricky. You got to hold your mic. Viktor forgot his mic stand today.
Figure it out. I'm gonna.
You just sit it on the table.
He doesn't have someone to help him hold the mic like we did at CDF Summit in China, where we had one of the presenters with the mic in hand, and then I think it was James Rollins who came up to the rescue and helped him out. That was pretty cool.
Nice.
You know? Yeah.
Nice. Oops, no, not that one. We went this one. There we go. All right, you might have to zoom in there a little bit. Might have to make your.
Yes. Let's do this. Let's set it up. Okay. Is this big enough? Would you say?
Yeah, that looks good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna create a new project from scratch. It's going to be based on Go, simply because I like to annoy everybody else who doesn't use it. And let's see what we get. La 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 la. Ah, I forgot the name of the project. So we're gonna call it project Bret Docker, for example.
So you see, he's creating a quick start, Bret, and that's what we have built-in quick starts for people in different languages. So Go is one of them, like the one he's using. But we have Node.js, we have Python, I think, we have PHP, and some other ones.
Nice.
So the general gist is that you use. Imagine that if it would be translated to English, it would be, hey, I want to start a new project, and I like to code in this language, and I like this framework. You give some kind of indication what you want, and then magic happens. And in this case, you can see that if I go to Bret Docker, I got all the files of my project. There is Docker file, there is make file, owners who define who can approve my pull requests. We assume, unless you tell us otherwise, that you're going to use Helm to deploy. So there is charts directory that has all the definition of your application. There is a pipeline. There is scaffold, which defines how to build and deploy, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say here, without going into details, probably because we don't have enough time for that, simply everything you might ever need for a project or likely to need for a project is there. It took me 1 minute. And get activities, Bret Docker, and we're gonna watch. And you can see that here's my pipeline, Bret. It's already running. It is already executing, building, running tests, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the process, it will deploy my new application that I created a few minutes ago to staging environment. And this is what I believe is interesting, is, let me see. You remember how we spoke about GitOps? So in most cases, for most people, deployment is simply I run a command that is deploying something somewhere. In this case, what it actually really did is that here it is. It made a pull request to Git that is dedicated to my environment and said, okay, from now on, this environment should have Bret Docker version 001 to say something. And that push initiated another process that in the background is doing something while I'm talking. And at the end of it, I will have my fancy application running in the staging environment. And I'm having it in a staging environment mostly because when I created a cluster, I said, I want my staging environment to receive new releases automatically every time I push something to the master branch.
Very cool. So it's got that PR workflow built in as an assumption, right? So it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It assumes that. So, but this is kind of where I think consistency comes in. It assumes that you're creating a pull request, and when we make some assumption, we make that assumption for everybody, meaning that you as a human should make a pull request, and if process should do something in Git, it should also create a pull request.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether actor is a human or a machine, it's always pull request.
Yeah, I like it. And is that, so the next question I'm thinking is, this supports GitHub, because you're showing that in GitHub, because I'm now thinking PRs are a distinct feature of Git products, right? That's not necessarily a Git feature. So are there Git backends that you support out of the box, I guess?
Yes, so depends on a Jenkins X flavor, whether it's static or serverless. Static supports everything, and serverless supports only GitHub today, but other Git providers like Bitbucket and GitLab are coming very soon.
Right.
I've been punished a couple of times when I explain what soon means in a number of days, so I'm gonna keep it on soon.
I'm the same way, man. I publish courses soon, so
it's coming soon. That's the message we always convey.
Yeah. In fact, both of you have books that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, but I'm sure that people are asking about books and you say soon.
That's right.
Yes.
Those take time to write. But I don't know how Viktor does it. He's like a writing machine, man. He's got like 3 or 4 books or something. I'm like, I don't have time.
No. Wait, Oscar. That's information from 5 years ago. Now it's 8 or 9. I'm not counting anymore, but I know it's more than 4 or 5. Yeah.
I can't even keep track. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, this is
I
really
write faster than you can read.
This is really cool. We can shift back to your screen, by the way, if we want. But I was just going to jump over here to our video because we're talking about books. But while we're talking about books, I'll interrupt and mention the books, and we'll throw some links in chat. So both of these guys are professional writers because they have technology books. So Oscar, real quick, tell us about what your book is or books.
Yeah. So the last book I wrote was about practicing DevOps around Microsoft's like SharePoint platform, right? And the premise of the book is to show people that just because you are using Microsoft products, it doesn't mean that you cannot use open source tool chains and stuff to manage those things, right? So the book walks you on how to provision an entire SharePoint farm via infrastructure as code to both AWS and Azure, right? Mm-hmm. And it also walks you through doing some configuration management with Ansible, right? So these are open source tools, and you don't need Microsoft specific tooling to be able to manage those. And so it's been quite a great, acceptance in the community. I actually have a little trip that I'm taking down to Mexico on October 12th, where I'll be doing some presentation on that. And I look forward to it because, I was born in Tijuana. So it's going to be great to visit my family down there while contributing to the community.
Yeah, so we put a link on for that book on Amazon in the chat. A decade ago, SharePoint deployments were a regular thing for me, and I can tell you that back then, automating the deployment was one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do. Like it was one of the most complicated products to automate, and it was before all of this stuff. It was actually more than a decade ago. I think it was like SharePoint 2007, and it was rough.
God, that was a painful era for sure, man. I remember. Yeah, no longer. We're not, subjected to that kind of pain anymore. It's very much automated now, and that's what the premise of the book is. It's like here's one way you can not grow gray hair too often or as fast.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice. I like the infrastructure as code SharePoint. Who would have thought it was going to be a thing? That's cool. Yeah. Viktor. So Viktor, I know we could talk all day about the books you've written. You got a lot of them. You write your sleep?
No, it's random stuff. So what I do is that I get bored fast. So every year I choose a new thing or process or toolset or whatever, right? New thing that I'm going to do. So then, and at the end of every year or more or less, I publish. That ends up being a book. So I dedicate a year of my life to go very, very deep into something. And then I believe kind of, if it just ends up in my head only, then it's kind of a huge waste.
Yeah.
Right. And since my English accent is horrible, I cannot do cool videos like you're doing, so I need to write.
You're doing just great, man.
Yeah, and your blog is great too. I have referenced over and over again, you were one of the first people I saw that did a really nice technical summary of differences between Swarm and Kubernetes back when nobody had really an understanding of. It was hard to keep up with one orchestrator, much less multiple orchestrators. And I thought you did a really great job of showing the simple decisions. If you get past the marketing and the hype of sort of which one is the most popular and the cool thing, and you just start talking about technical features and how do you do the same thing with two different products. And I thought that was a really great way. That's on isn't that Technology Conversations?
That's the one.
Yeah. So we'll throw technologyconversations.com there in the chat. That's a good one. So tell us about your latest book. just came out, fresh off the press.
Which one? 2 came out.
Oh no!
You see what I mean? You see what I mean?
No one prepared me for this.
There you go. I'm full of surprises.
All right.
Yeah, so the one you're referring to, probably the one where actually you own like 6% of the book.
Ooh.
Not in income, because nobody earns money from books. But I assume that you're talking about that one, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what I felt at one moment, that I go to a lot of conferences, workshops, stuff like this, similar like you, meet a lot of people, and those conversations are amazing. And I felt that it would be cool to bring that type of content to people. Kind of just have a random conversation with a cool person and record it and then convert it after a process to a book, right? You remember the conversation we had. There was no script, no prepared answers, just let's talk about stuff. I know you know good, cool stuff.
Just a couple of guys and beer. That's all it took.
Most of
The basics.
most of the interviews were done with beer or gin tonic. That I do admit. So if anybody expects that there is some kind of preparation for that book or something like that, there's none. It's just conversations with cool people. That's all there is.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I've already had some comments in my Slack community for my courses where people have read that book and were highlighting quotes they liked out of it. So that's. I haven't read it yet. I'm anxiously waiting on my copy in the mail. So,
is he gonna send you a free copy?
Yeah.
Is that gonna?
Yeah, I guess that's a benefit of talking for 2 hours on, and having everything you said over a couple of beers in a strange country put into written form on the internet forever. So,
Exactly.
Well, okay. So what's the other one? I don't even know about the other one. Is it a brand new book, or is it an update to an existing one, or? No,
it's Jenkins X. I mean,
oh,
that shouldn't be hard to guess. Kind of. That's the topic of this year in my case.
Perfect. Well, okay. So what was? I'm sorry. DevOps Paradox was the name of the first book, right? So
yes.
What's the name of the other book?
The DevOps 2.6 toolkit and then Jenkins X. So every book I publish is DevOps toolkit, except the Paradox, because I didn't publish it myself.
Right.
So it's a 7th book in the series, and this time is dedicated to Jenkins X.
Yeah. So if you go check out his site at Technology Conversations, you'll see these different books that say like DevOps Toolkit 2.1 or 2.2 or something like that, and each book is has a different focus, right? So make sure when you're picking those out, you pick the ones that are the topics you care about, because it's not just a revision and update to an existing book. It's a whole different topic usually. So
that's the idea. Just don't buy those first ones I wrote, because they're obsolete.
That's true.
Most of my books start with, hey, whatever you read in my previous book, don't do it. This is a good thing.
So read them. So we read them in reverse chronological order. If you read the newest book, and then if you want more backstory of the evolution, because I think I love it, because it's almost like you're writing as you learn. Like things are happening to you, new products are coming out, new ways of doing things, GitOps, whatever, DevOps itself, and you're writing a new book about that. Some people go back and revise their book, which sometimes can be harder, because you have to figure out what to throw away and what to add, and then you have to fit it into the story and narrative you already had. So it's an interesting model that you're doing, and I like it. So.
I mean, I do keep all the books, or most of them, up to date. So I do both of the things. But yeah, focus is on something new always.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's the theme of, if you're in this world and you're not learning something new always, then you're probably doing it wrong. So
Agreed.
There's some questions in chat. I want to throw out some more. I know that some of them, Oscar, you've answered, but we'll just talk about them.
Yeah.
Can I use Jenkins plugins on Jenkins X?
Yep. So I answered part of it. I'll also augment that, because here's the thing. You can deploy a static master using Jenkins X, right? And so now you have this thing running 24/7 in your cloud and spending money, whatever. But we recommend and we push for you to use the serverless, where you have Tecton pipelines, which are destroyed immediately after they run and all that stuff, right? So cost savings. But the short answer is you can do both. But we're leaning towards having our users focus on the serverless model for Jenkins X.
Yeah, I see. I like and I feel like I would advocate for this idea of sort of reboot use this as an opportunity to reboot your CI process and make it not just we're going to try this cool new product, but also let's, most of us probably, because we've been around a while and very few companies are lucky enough to have a brand new team with a brand new CI.
Right.
Our CI has warts in it. It has years and years of scripts and old pipelines that are inefficient or don't even at the end of the day. We wrote them before we even knew what DevOps was, and we weren't using YAML and Git repos to manage our infrastructure, our deployments, and so I can see this as a really great opportunity just to reset your thinking and come at it from a fresh approach, and then not trying to take your old things. Now that doesn't probably mean that it's going to take a while, right? Like you've got years and years of history, in some cases decades of history of stuff that you're going to have to maybe think up new ways to do things. And I always, one of the things when I talk at conferences about containers is always minimizing the project scope, because every IT project has a bigger scope than it probably needs to. And when it comes to containers, we all seem to want to use that as an opportunity to like redo everything. So I don't normally advocate for this, but I feel like you're the way you're preaching about like just start fresh, don't try to bring the old stuff in. The serverless model, it's cool.
You want to carry a lot of baggage, that's for sure.
To me, that's kind of, and this is not really Jenkins X related, but I don't even understand. Keep things, if they work for you, fine, keep it. Why not concentrate on new stuff with new stuff, right? So if you would just move Jenkins plugins and everything to Jenkins X, then you would end up having Jenkins. Right. And you already do have Jenkins, so keep it.
Yeah. That's a great argument. I like that.
Yeah. So, the last thing I'll say on this topic, Bret, is that we do understand, the core team understands that companies cannot move away from a product immediately. There is baggage, like you said. So we support it, but do we preach it? Do we encourage you to throw in your static master? No, we don't. It's just, that's not the focus of Jenkins.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, you can run these products in parallel. Like, it's just like, to me, it's just like the container migration. Like you set up Docker at first, or Kubernetes, or whatever you decide to do, and day one is you put one container deployment on that system, and you run that in production. And so many clients want, they scope out the project, and of course the project eventually everything is on containers, but it seems like they think, okay, we're going to do this whole app, that like the 5 tiers of the app, we're going to put them all in the containers the same day, and we're going to switch to that in day one. And I always want to just say, no, let's just do one thing. Let's just do one. It's boring. Like, it doesn't seem like you achieved much, but wait a couple of weeks, like learn some stuff. The next question, real quick. SonarQube does. This is a specific product. I don't know about SonarQube, but asking about integration of SonarQube and Jenkins X.
So, I think that a lot changed since Jenkins X appeared. When Jenkins X appeared, you needed plugins because integration with other tools was a nightmare. So somebody had to write thousands of lines of code and package it as a plugin so that you can integrate with that something. That's not how the world works today. Jenkins X, I can safely say Jenkins X integrates with everything, because everything today that is worth using has an API or CLI. So just run your command. CURL something somewhere, and then there you go. Integrations are a single line of a shell command today.
Nice.
Yeah. And I would add to that, just to emphasize one thing of the flexibility that Jenkins X has is that you can create what we call an add-on right now. You know what? The terminology is still in flux, but just realize that you can create an add-on and say, I want to like plug in SonarQube, or we have Anchor right now. I think we have several. We have Istio. We have a whole bunch of stuff that people don't know about. So I'm trying to raise awareness there. But the way we would do it is someone in the community would help create an add-on for SonarQube. And then guess what? It's available to you and the rest of the community.
But until that happens, CURL is your friend.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It looks like, Victor, you have some fans in chat. Sujay's, another Docker Captain, is jumped in the chat and saying thanks for your Docker Flow proxy. Hello, Sujay. Been on the show before. Someone else, Crispy, says, I just realized I've read your DevOps Toolkit book and I'm in your Slack. That's great. So, brilliant. Yeah. The same Victor. It's the same Victor. There's lots of Victors, but this one is special.
Not so many with K instead of C.
Yes, that's how you know.
Yep, this is the difference.
So someone in the chat popped up. This is not a Jenkins question, but someone just popped in and said, I did your Docker course on Udemy 3 times. Enjoy listening to your podcast. Thank you. When you're at the gym, so good to know people are learning container tech at the gym. And I need to start learning Kubernetes from beginning. Where do I start? I would recommend you wait for soon. The update to Docker Mastery will include hours worth of Kubernetes for free if you already have Docker Mastery. It's all going to come out in that course for existing students, all 120,000 of them. And then, later this year, we're going to be releasing a whole new Kubernetes course that doesn't teach you Docker and Swarm and Compose and all those things. It assumes you have the basics of Docker, and then it starts you from like, how do I build a container cluster? And you move straight through the Kubernetes pure path, I guess. I don't know. So we're going to have, hopefully that, I don't have a date on that one either, but later than the soon, but sooner than later. So with Jenkins X, how does one get started? What's the best way? Should they jump on the Jenkins X website, on GitHub? What do they do?
There is a good book.
There's an excellent book on technologyconversations.com.
Yep.
Yeah. So seriously, Jenkins-X.io is the starting point.
There's a newsletter.
That's the official. There is a newsletter. Oscar is actually sending you spam if you subscribe to newsletters.
Hey! My stuff is not spam. First of all, man, I give out precious information.
I'm on that newsletter, so I see your precious information, and it's good. It's good updates. Not too. It's like Goldilocks. It's not too often. Not you're not a stranger, but you're not spamming my inbox. So. Sorry.
Yeah. I actually, we were doing every 2 weeks, Bret, and I switched it to now doing monthly because I want to provide our users, our community, deeper technical content on that newsletter. So the next one coming out in October is going to be far deeper in terms of, what's happening with a specific area. One of my focuses right now are 2 things, actually. One is SSO, enabling SSO for some of your apps that you deploy using Jenkins X, but also JX Boot, which we mentioned earlier about configuration management and using GitOps for your entire JX configuration, which I plan to dive into on our next newsletter.
Very cool. So you can get that at Jenkins-X.io. That'll get you to the documentation. Of course, you can hop from there to GitHub and all the things. I'm looking at the installing on an existing Kubernetes cluster stuff right now, and I'm excited to play with this. I'm looking for tools that streamline from the get-go for GitOps is something that I think I eventually want to turn into some sort of teaching tool, because I think once people learn containers, and part of what's happening in the industry is that enough people if you're just now learning containers, you're probably not on the bleeding edge, like a lot of us that stay on the bleeding edge. It's convenient when you don't work for a big company to stay on the bleeding edge, but a lot of people, they're just now learning containers, so they're also just now implementing some DevOps practices into their workflows and their teams, so they're kind of learning all this stuff at once. And I like the idea of giving them some options for the workflow part, because that's one of the most common questions after someone learns a container tool is like, okay, now how do I get my code onto the servers with as little pain as possible? And it's usually, in the past, it's been a very hard, you're going after niche tools with like 100 GitHub stars, or you're going after scripts or something that's maybe not what you would recommend to a company to depend on completely. And so it's nice to have the weight of CloudBees behind a tool that is very streamlined to this specific new workflow that I think we're all talking about more and more. And I'm anxious to see how you guys progress and how this tool works in the open source community. So, get on that newsletter, people. That's a good thing. All right, so we just hit an hour. I'm looking through the questions, and other than thank you. Some accolades for my courses about becoming a DevOps engineer. And good luck on your career. I'm excited to hear about more people getting into DevOps all the time. But so we know where to find you on Twitter. So those are our Twitter handles down there. Where we talked, Victor, we said your technologyconversations.com. That's where else to find you on the internet, right?
LinkedIn, email. You can send carrier pigeons for all I care. Excellent. You'll find me.
Signal.
Yeah. Got to find the carrier pigeons that know about Victor with a K, though. So, Oscar, where else can people find you on the internet?
Man, if you just Google, there'll probably be some stuff you don't want to find. But my blog, SharePointOscar.com, which is, that name kind of stuck forever with me. So that's sort of my brand. But I do a lot more than SharePoint.
Well, I have an old blog and a new blog too. I have my old one that is more the Microsoft side at fishbrains.com, and then all my DevOpsy stuff and Docker stuff is at Bret Fisher. So yeah, I have that same problem. Is like we all do more than one thing in life. Like I could probably blog about gaming because I do that too, but that would have to be a totally separate thing.
Yeah. So we had a little contest internally. It's like, let's come up with a name for Oscar's next Twitter handle, and the winner gets XYZ, whatever. And then it died. So I guess I'm keeping the old one.
It died. So no good examples?
There were no good examples. Nobody can come up with something. So it was like, okay, cool.
That's hard, man. That's like changing. It's almost like on the internet. It's almost like changing your name or changing your email address. It's a serious decision.
Or your social security, man.
Yeah, because once you put something on your name there, you're committing to it. Like,
it's full-on commitment there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun. I think we've gotten through all the questions. And I hope that people have learned a little bit about Jenkins X and other the cool stuff going on at CloudBees. It's great to see new products coming out of companies that have traditionally had they've had products for a while, and you trust and know those products. But it's nice to see sort of a reboot almost of an idea that what is the term here? The innovator's dilemma. If you know that terminology, that's a common problem in the industry, and it looks like you all are just meeting it head on by saying, you know what, we're going to rethink the way we do things and just give it a shot and see what people take with it. And I think I like that approach, and applaud you for even attempting it. So it's a brave world to do it. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. And of course, both these guys will probably be back on the show at some point in the future. Thumbs up this video, and do the whole thing of subscribe, click that little dinner bell so when we come live next week, because we're going to have more guests in the coming weeks. We're planning on that, and usually in a couple of days, we'll be sending out a newsletter that gives you details on stuff that's going on. And of course, follow me on Twitter and wherever else, Facebooks and all those things, and you'll see notifications about our upcoming shows. And again, thank you so much, guys, and have a great day on the internet. We'll see you back here in a week on YouTube Live.
Thanks so much, Bret.
Cheers.